Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today is an extra special episode, one I've been looking very much forward to. Today I'm joined by Bob Ackerman. Bob is the founder of AllegisCyber and a co-founder of DataTribe. He's been investing in cybersecurity startups for over 20 years and has been referred to as one of cybersecurity's money men. Finally, Bob's been recognized as a Fortune 100 cybersecurity executive and sits on the boards of dozens of fast growth cybersecurity companies. Bob, absolute pleasure to have you on the pod today. How are you doing?
Ben, it's great to be here with you, and thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, no problem at all, Bob. Typically, would love to start with just a brief intro to you, really, a little bit about who you are, how you've got where you're at, and what your mission is at the moment.
Well, sounds good. Well, look, the short story on me is a computer science background. The deeper end of the technology pool, I'm actually an operating systems guy, and kind of out of university, jumped right into working with tech companies along the way. Kind of got the itch to move away from big tech and jump to the world of startups. And, as part of that journey, had the opportunity to start and lead two startups. One was one of the two main Unix operating systems houses in the world. So a company I grew out of cash flow back at a point in time, just to date myself, when venture capitalists weren't really sure about software as a standalone business. So we grew that business out of cash flow. Which was a great way to learn about building a business. So you really learn how to prioritize and to focus, because you don't have the cushion of other people's money to insulate you from reality. You basically, if you're going to eat, you have to kill something that day. So you become very, very focused, and led the growth of that business to operations around the world. Did a lot of work with folks like AT&T that owned Unix, and Apple Computer did all of the original Apple Unix development work. And subsequently started another company, a company called InfoGear, which originated the iPhones. And so we took a small piece of intellectual property out of National Semiconductor. We owned the patent for the integration of the web and telephony. Actually owned trademarks iPhone and iPad.
Wow.
Sold that company successfully to Cisco. And then a few years later, Apple decided to build iPhones and stepped all over a lot of intellectual property. But along the way, I had the pleasure to be backed by a couple of really great venture firms, Sequoia Capital and NEA, and both really encouraged me to look at transitioning into venture capital. And so back in just about 26 years ago at this point in time, coming up on 27 years. I started what is today Allegis Capital, and Allegis, as you pointed out, we've been investing in cybersecurity for about 22 years now. We were the first dedicated cyber venture firm focused on cyber, raised the first dedicated cyber venture funds. We're pretty good at it. We've got for those that count scores, our gross IRR over 20 years in cybersecurity is 57%, so reasonable performance. And then, as you also mentioned, about 7 years ago, I co-founded with my partner Mike Janke DataTribe. DataTribe is described as a foundry. We like that metaphor. Forging raw ingredients into things of higher value and greater utility. And DataTribe operates in just outside of Columbia, Maryland. And what we do at DataTribe is we start companies, principally with teams coming out of national security. And, so we start basically 3 companies a year. We've started 18 companies at this point in time. 17 of those 18 went on to be financed at the Series A level. One of them, we thought we were just too far ahead of the market and decided not to take that company forward. But we partner with entrepreneurs who are technical domain masters, but don't really have a lot of experience building companies. And we provide their seed capital. We move them into our offices. DataTribe has an operating team of 8 that have all got 3 to 5 startups behind them that really partner with the tech entrepreneurs to start companies. And in the world of cyber, if you look at things like Dragos and the industrial control security space, that is a company that started with 3 engineers out of the NSA at DataTribe, and today is a unicorn and the leader in the industrial security marketplace. Inveil in homomorphic encryption, Strider in counterintelligence. So the stuff we do there is very cutting edge, and really part of our thematic approach to the business, which is if you want to build cutting edge defense, you start with teams that wrote the offensive playbooks, because virtually all of the threats we operate with in cybersecurity today originate in an offensive playbook. Unlike any other area of technology, offense actually paces innovation in cybersecurity. So if you want to understand where cybersecurity companies need to get built, where defensive responses need to get created, you take your cues from offense. And so what we do at DataTribe is we identify those offensive teams in areas where there is expertise, where we know companies need to get built. And we create those companies there. So that's kind of what we do.
Amazing. Yeah, such a good profile summary. I'm interested actually just off the back of that. So it sounds like you've got quite a good process, and a fairly defined plan really with the DataTribe companies of few engineers from national security build up from there. To what extent is that a rigid playbook that you sort of lather, rinse, repeat with new ideas versus you're switching that up depending on the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it was our guiding principle, our founding principle, because I frankly at Allegis, I had taken teams out of the NSA and moved them to Silicon Valley, and had quite a bit of success with that. And when we started DataTribe, the catalyst was really twofold. Number one, we got to a place where we felt we understand this market really, really well. We understand, there was a great Canadian hockey player that played in the U.S. by the name of Wayne Gretzky, and people always used to talk to Gretzky about what makes you so good. He says, I skate to where the puck is going to be. And what we got to at Allegis is basically a bias that we knew what needed to be built, and we were going to start building companies, starting companies. It's incredibly labor intensive process. It's a little hard to do inside of a traditional venture firm. So we said, we got to find a better way to do that. And in parallel with that, we got to a place 7 years ago where I can no longer move teams from Maryland, where the National Security Agency is based, out to Silicon Valley. It just didn't work. A senior engineer coming out of the National Security Agency may make $138,000 a year, married, 1 or 2 children, has a home. There was no way you're going to move them to Silicon Valley. You could triple their salary, and you couldn't move them to Silicon Valley. And so our conclusion was, well, let's go to the source. Let's go to Maryland. And what we found when we got to Maryland was 2 things. On the downside, absolutely no tradition of venture capital financing of startup activity. No tradition. At the same time, what you found in Maryland was the largest concentration of cyber engineering in the world. 110,000 cyber engineers, 16 cyber centers of excellence, University of Maryland graduating more cyber degrees than any other university system anywhere in the world. Now, how do you get that dichotomy? That deep reservoir of cyber engineering talent is a byproduct of the U.S. government spending tens of billions of dollars a year for decades developing advanced cyber capabilities. But again, the bulk of those resources were deployed against government services. So that whole Silicon Valley playbook, that tradition of venture capital financing entrepreneurs, really didn't exist in Maryland. So, on the one hand, I kind of talk about this as sort of a frontier market. You get to a brand new market where there's tremendous opportunity, but no infrastructure. And so our response was, okay, we're going to create the infrastructure. And that infrastructure was basically DataTribe. So we took Silicon Valley playbook, a little bit of capital, our knowledge of the cyber market on a global basis. We probably know every customer everywhere in the world. We know all the top executives. We put all that in a box, and we called it DataTribe. And we opened up for business, frankly, next to the National Security Agency with a big sign that says entrepreneurs want to eat. And we began to look for, entrepreneurial engineering talent that had developed their skills at a very, very high level with the backing of the U.S. government. Many times offensive-oriented engineering talent, many times data science-related engineering talent. And we would transition those teams when they were ready to start a company over to DataTribe. And it's been a highly successful program. It's unique in the world, and it's been very, very successful.
Yeah, and it's the way you explain it, it's easy to see why. But it sounds like no one had that idea before you. So that's amazing. And when you're looking at an investment opportunity, then what is it that excites you or actually sort of scares you about that kind of opportunity? And then at what point do you look back and decide whether that's been a success or not?
Yeah, I think fundamentally we're in the people business. Yeah, we're looking for great big markets. We're looking for disruptive technology that can respond to those market needs and create value in the process, both for the eventual customer, but also for the investors and for the team. But fundamentally, we're in the people business. From start to finish, it's never a straight line. I always, I describe it as akin to running through a minefield naked in the middle of the night. The chances of getting through and past pretty remote. And so you start saying, well, how do you mitigate those risks?
Mm,
People, and frankly, the right investors, the right combination of not just capital. Capital is a commodity. It's the experience in navigating your way through that minefield. So for us, is it a big idea? Is there disruptive technology that will respond to that big idea? But fundamentally, it comes down, is it a great team? Is it a team that we can basically lock arms with, become partners with, where we can work together, them sharing their technical vision, their technical expertise with our experience in building companies, our understanding of the markets, to mitigate the risk that's inherent in any startup companies. That's kind of the package, that we look for. Do we always get it right? No, we don't always get it right. But if you do it enough, when you meet teams around ideas, you get a feeling. Now due diligence is how you validate that feeling. But it's if you do it enough, and our team have all been entrepreneurs. We've all sat in that seat. We've all been faced with those same choices. As I tell entrepreneurs all the time, when you're looking for a venture capital partner, find somebody who's walked in your moccasins, somebody who's been on that same journey. If your investors haven't had that experience of laying awake at 2 a.m. going, how in the hell do I make payroll next month? They don't know. I don't care what business school they went to. Unless you have that experience, you don't know. And so for us, our team has that DNA. It's core to who we are. Very old school venture capital in a lot of ways. But we're looking for entrepreneurs that value that, where we can form that trusted relationship, where we can say, no, not in that direction. Move over here a little bit to the right, or let me tell you what's coming up. Let me tell you where the speed bumps are going to get you. We're looking for that kind of relationship where we really view ourselves as partners, much less than financiers. I tell people all the time, it's like, we're not financial managers. We build companies. Along the way, do we deploy capital in support of that mission? But our job is to find great teams with big ideas, addressing major problems in the marketplace, form a tight bonded partnership to build companies. And that's how we measure success at the end of the day.
So when you're in the room, maybe for the first time with a collection of founders, perhaps before you've done major due diligence and you're kind of hearing it out, do you have a sort of utility belt of questions that you have at the ready to go to, where if you qualify X, Y, Z, you're going to come away with that feeling, whether it's in the positive direction or the negative?
Yeah, look, I mean, what we're doing that first meeting is we're assessing. Frankly, we are, can they clearly articulate the value proposition? And do they really understand the market they're going after, how big that market is, what the customer's point of pain is, how their solution is going to resonate with that customer's point of pain? But in parallel with that storytelling, we're evaluating the people. Who's in the room? How do they interact with each other? Do they collaborate with each other, or is it one person dominate everything? How do they respond to questions? Are they defensive? Are they open? What I love to hear is people say, "Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. We've got to figure that out." And so we're really assessing, the people, and how do they respond to constructive criticism? How do they respond to questions? You're really trying to formulate an opinion. If it's a big idea and it's solid tech, can we work with these people? Is there really going to be that trusted partnership? And you got to remember, for entrepreneurs, the objective of the first meeting is not to close on a financing; it's to get to the second meeting, right? And so I think what you really want to do is you want to, in that first meeting, demonstrate your knowledge of the market, your knowledge of the problem set, why your solution validates. You're establishing basically your bona fides. That's what you want to do in that first meeting. There will be many meetings after that first meeting to get into a lot of details, a lot of back and forth. We'll talk about your models. But, I think understanding what is the objective of the first meeting with a venture capital, it's to get to the second meeting, right? And to begin to build a rapport. Sometimes, people walk in with phenomenally, sometimes overproduced PowerPoint decks, and that's fine. But sometimes what I love to do, turn you loose at a whiteboard, unscripted, no deck, now come, right? And what you find is, it's a great way to measure the ability of people's skill set on the fly to articulate, to capture, to distill, and to communicate. And one of my favorite tactics. So.
I like that tactic. Sounds scary though, sitting on the other side of a Zoom call. Well, Bob.
You find out real quick how well people know their material.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about the last 2 years, really, because I work with startups as well for my, in my day to day, and my kind of perspective is the last 2 years we've seen three kind of market conditions, really. We had the COVID pandemic period, which was, a global situation, something we'd never really seen before. Hiring pretty much dropped off the face of the earth. Unfortunately, lots of layoffs and stuff like that. Then following that was a period last year of probably the best hiring in decades in terms of tech. Lots and lots of funding rounds, some of the record-breaking Series A and seed stages. And now this year, what I'm hearing is that it's getting increasingly more difficult to get that funding over the line. So I'm really keen to hear, Bob, from your perspective on the other side of that funding table, what those last 2 years have been like for you.
Yeah, no, it's the old expression, right? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. but I'm going to invert that. So if I go back a year ago, this is going to sound contrarian. It was the worst of times. And today is the best of times. Now, what the heck, Bob? What's going on here, right? Exactly what you said, Ben. Going into, if you were an entrepreneur raising money last year, it was on a relative basis phenomenally easy. This year, phenomenally difficult. Well, how does Bob Ackerman say last year was the worst of times and this year is the best of times? Because last year, any team that could spell cybersecurity and almost get it right could raise money, right? Not a good thing. A lot of things that should not have gotten funded got funded. A lot of Me Too, undifferentiated commodity startups got funded. What does that do? It sucks the oxygen out of the room. It makes it much more difficult for the companies with true differentiation to kind of compete for attention in the marketplace. Vis-a-vis today, it's awfully difficult to get funded. Why is that the best of times? Because only the truly worthy, only solid teams with great ideas that are clearly articulated, that will move the needle, really have a chance of getting funded. So if you think about it holistically from an ecosystem perspective, what we saw a year ago, 18 months ago, was sort of the indiscriminate funding by the venture community of any and all things with cyber in their name. And this is not unique to cybersecurity. This is what the venture herd does. Whenever the venture capital community discovers an area that is, that's going to run, right, where there's just a lot of opportunity, it will crowd in and it will overcapitalize that sector. And a lot of value will actually get destroyed in the process. Because it makes it harder for the truly differentiated to cut through the noise, whether that's in a funding environment or whether that's talking to customers. The noise level and the associated signal to noise problem becomes almost unmanageable. Today, what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of consolidation. There are 107 threat intelligence companies in the marketplace. How many do we need? 5 will get us there, right? 10 maybe at the outside. So there's 90 companies that need to go away. And they will either fail to raise capital because they are undifferentiated, or they will be acquired, or they will be consolidated. So what we're going to go through is kind of a great rationalization of the cyber market, which is a good and healthy thing. I get asked all the time, is cyber overfunded or underfunded? And I said, yes. Which is it? I said, it's both. So how can it be both? I said, the Me Too undifferentiated commodity stuff is grossly overfunded. The really important stuff, the stuff that's going to change our life 3 to 5 years from now, that's dealing with the new emerging threats, grossly undercapitalized. I'll give you an example. When we started Dragos, there was no industrial control systems security business. It didn't exist. And our observation was, looking at offensive playbooks, is that offensive operators were beginning to target industrial control systems. The Russians took down the Ukrainian power grid, for example, twice. And so we pulled Rob Lee and his co-founders out of the National Security Agency. They were the core of the NSA's offensive industrial team, and say, okay, let's take your knowledge of offense. You understand the technology, you understand the vulnerabilities, you understand how you would attack critical infrastructure. Let's apply all of that knowledge to build defensive countermeasures. Because we know that whenever you have a sort of a cutting edge offensive playbook developed, that 4 to 6 years later, that offensive playbook is going to be in the wild. It is going to become, an entirely new threat vector for the marketplace. And so we knew that with industrial control systems. But I'll tell you, when we went out to raise Dragos' Series A financing, I operate within a community of cyber investors. There's about 10 that really are kind of the core. The information put out a report, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago that said, okay, who are, they started this cyber's money men thing. Who are the key guys in cyber? And there were 10 of us. And the criteria at that point in time were, who's been doing cyber for 15 plus years? And there really were 10 of us. And so I took Dragos out to 8 of the 10. I was one, so I can't give it to myself. I'm already there. And one of the other guys that was doing something that I thought might turn out to be competitive. And across the board, people, the reaction from the venture. Now, this is a cyber venture group, right? Was like, Bob, industrial. Nobody's ever made money in industrial. What are you doing in industrial? And I said, it's a slow-moving market dominated by big players like Emerson and Rockwell and Siemens and Honeywell. And, it's impossible for disruptive innovation to inject itself into that market. And my perspective was, cyber is going to change everything you knew about industrial. And they said, how do you have so much conviction? I said, I understand the offensive playbook. And this is a new area of offensive activity, and it's going to affect all industrial on a global basis. And it's going to totally change that paradigm that you articulate about industrial, which in fact has turned out to be the case. And now these are cyber guys who are saying, industrial, really? And the second reaction was, they're in Maryland, Bob. They should move to Silicon Valley. The classic Silicon Valley response, right? They should move to Silicon Valley. And I said, well, they're not moving to Silicon Valley for all the reasons we talked about earlier, which was kind of the core to founding Data Tribe. Economically, it just wasn't going to happen. Well, Dragos raised their Series D financing a year ago at a $1.7 billion valuation. And so even cyber guys, right, who you think traditionally, and these are guys that I have a lot of respect with. I work with all of them. We compete, we co-invest, but the ability to see a new emerging market, it wasn't obvious to them. And this is where this offense defense perspective comes from. But it also, in my mind, highlights why cyber, you can't do cyber part-time. It's like doing biotech part-time. Yeah, I'm doing IT and I'm doing biotech. I don't think so. You've got to develop really, really deep domain knowledge to understand the technology. It's very complex. It's very sophisticated. It moves very, very fast. You have to develop that domain knowledge if you're going to have an unfair competitive advantage in cyber. It's like people starting cyber companies say, yeah, the last thing I did was a sharing economy company. Now I'm doing cyber. Yeah, I don't think so. In our playbook, unless you've spent your entire career in cyber, you're probably not going to be a candidate for us because the market moves so quickly that there is not time for you to learn on the job. You have to bring a baseline of knowledge, a baseline of experience to be able to track against a rapidly evolving marketplace. So.
Yeah, amazing. You're so right about it being probably the only industry where the pace of innovation, as you said, dictated by the offensive. It's such a unique, and I think that's also another thing that makes cyber really unique. Going off on a bit of a tangent here is a lot of technological products, like whether it's a data analytics product or a payments platform, when you then go to market and sell it, you're selling based on value, value add. Whereas cybersecurity is one of the only things I can think of where you're almost selling against the risk. So if nothing happens and you don't see any change, then you've got the value.
Which is a little hard, right? Because it's difficult with so much tech. You walk in and say, look, buy my product or subscribe to my service, and you're gonna, it's gonna be 3 times as fast, half as expensive, and your IRR is going to be very, very obvious, right? Cyber, it's much more difficult. Cyber, the IRR, the ROI of cyber. Sometimes there are in some products it is. We consolidate these 3 products to one product, and so there's a reduction of expense, there's some reduced operational complexity, and there is an implicit ROI associated with that. But so much of cyber is the bad guys didn't get you, right? Well, how do you measure that? You sleep at night, and so it's a very technical market. You're selling to very technical customers. It's the selling motion is very different, but it all starts with the core technology. And one of the things you talked about, you and I talked about this in advance. One of the things about cyber is phenomenally resilient. When we made the decision to focus exclusively on cyber, it was that conviction of can't do this part-time. This stuff is too complex, it moves too fast. But economically was the realization that the global economy is digitizing, and cyber threats are the existential threat to that globalized digital economy. And if you buy that premise, cyber becomes one of those areas where you don't have a choice but to invest. The consequences of getting it wrong are unaffordable. And when you're investing in cyber, from let's say an enterprise perspective, you have to invest in cutting edge innovation because there are no awards for second best. Virtually all of the cutting edge innovation is in private companies because big tech can't innovate fast enough to be competitive in cyber. What they do is acquire cutting edge cyber innovation to offer to their customers. So you've got this robust path to liquidity through either M&A or IPO, much more often M&A. When a cyber company tends to exit either through an IPO or through M&A, it tends to exit at a 30 to 40% premium to core IT. Look, the cyber market is growing at 12% compounded annually. Core IT is growing at 3%. So it's growing 4 times as fast. There's an insatiable demand, all of which kind of puts wind under the wings of the cyber market. And then you realize at the end of the day, the whole thing's uncorrelated. And what I mean by that is cyber continues to grow. Budgets move to the right, up and to the right, regardless of what's going on in the economy. You saw with COVID, when public equity markets were selling off, cyber companies took off because the entire threat perimeter was redefined, requiring a whole reinvention of the definition of security for the enterprise. And so it's a phenomenally resilient market. It doesn't mean that cyber is recession proof. We've seen public cyber companies, while they're doing phenomenally well, we've seen pressure on their multiples, but their fundamental businesses continue to be very, very strong. I look at my portfolio of companies. By and large, there's always a company that's got an operational issue they're working through and operational challenges. That's part of building companies. But our Drago's 100% year-over-year growth, and see that for the foreseeable future. Why? Because you've got a greenfield market in industrial security where there is really no historical baseline, that everybody now is having to gear up to secure that infrastructure. And it's not one of those areas where utilities or petrochemical facilities or manufacturing facilities say, yeah, we're going to get to security after the recession. Not really a choice. In fact, adversaries tend to step up their activity in recessionary periods, hoping that people will have lowered their guard a little bit. And so the threats actually become more vibrant in a down economy. So cyber's got a lot of virtues, going for it in terms of the demand is always there, the budgets are always growing. There are challenges. There is vendor saturation that will be rationalized through this economic period of correction that we're going through. But the foreseeable future for cyber is incredibly bright.
Yeah, well, that's good for me as well, Bob. So I appreciate your insight on that. We're coming to the end of the time here, so I just had one final question that I wanted to cover off, which was, let's say I'm a founder, right? I've got the skills, the knowledge, and the ambition to start something, but I need a venture capitalist partner. What is step one in finding who I should be reaching out to and then getting that first meeting booked in?
Well, look, I look for somebody with really, really deep domain knowledge. You want to have an intelligent conversation around your innovation, why your innovation is important, the big market opportunity. You want to have that with somebody that can hold their end of the conversation, somebody that has that domain expertise. So my advice, number one, is find a venture capitalist or venture capitalists that have a track record of success in cyber. You'll be able to have a much more intelligent conversation. They will be able to give you frank and valued feedback. You may appreciate it, you may not appreciate it, but if you're trying to shape your idea, steel sharpens steel. Find the best, brightest people you can and bet your idea with them. You will get better as a result of those interactions. And it's a relatively small group of people. So you really have to do your homework to identify who are those venture capitalists. Once you've identified them, and again, in my world, I kind of think about 10 at the early stage. And once you identify those people, what you ideally do is get a warm introduction. You can cold call, but I get approached on 1,000 deals a year. At Allegis, we'll make 6 to 8 investments. Data Tribe will look at 300 to 400 opportunities. We'll make 3 investments, right? So you got a signal to noise problem. So you've got to figure out how to get through my defensive perimeters, which are not based on ignorance or arrogance. They're based on time. And so you've got to find a way to get my attention. And the way you do that is by looking at people that that know me, who will make that warm introduction and say, hey, Bob, I've known John. John knows his stuff. I think what he's working on is really interesting. Would you mind spending a few minutes with them? My business, because I have that signal to noise problem, I use proxies, people that I know, to help me calibrate. How do I parse all of those opportunities? And that warm introduction to one of those 10 investors are the 2 things that I would focus on. And then when you get that first meeting, be prepared. The good news about talking with somebody that knows what they're doing is, frankly, you can't bullshit them. So don't, be very straightforward, be very transparent, be very articulate. And remember, the objective is not to close the financing. It's not going to happen. The objective is to get that venture capitalist to say, hey, I'd like to spend more time with you. That's the objective of that first meeting. So those are 3 things that I would think about. And I think one that you and I talked about is how entrepreneurs approach valuation. Look, interim valuations don't mean a damn thing. You know what matters? How much of the company do you own at the end of the day when you're successful? That's what matters. The right venture capitalists will add a tremendous amount of value. The wrong venture capitalists will just bring capital. Now, what I've seen many times in cybersecurity is the right venture capitalists are going to drive a little harder bargain. They know this space. They know the challenges. They also know the customers. They know all the executives that you need. They've got the knowledge that will translate into an unfair competitive advantage for you, the entrepreneur. You want them at the table. They will improve your probability of being successful. They will also help you raise subsequent rounds of financing. I can't tell you how many people approach us all the time looking at our early stage portfolio saying, hey, when are they raising their B or when are they raising their C? And they will pay up to participate in one of our companies because those later stage investors use our expertise as a proxy for the companies that they want to be investing in. So what you're going to find is don't get hung up on that initial valuation. Think about, does this investor help me reduce risk, accelerate my growth, and improve my probability of raising follow-on capital in the later stages of financing? And they will be worth their weight in gold. That's my advice.
And yeah, again, Bob, it's amazing advice. So I can thank you for that, and thank you for the time so far today. It's been insight, it's been humor, and it's been some real takeaways for our listeners. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, Ben, always a pleasure, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Me too, Bob. Well, thanks again. And to those of you listening at home, please do tune in next time to Growing Tech Fast.